So the first question, so why had you originally decided to transition your career? What made you want to make a change?
Honestly, it was listening to my friends and their advice and telling me that I was really being overworked and underappreciated in the current role that I was in, just given the intense hours that I was working. And it was through those conversations and then ultimately sort of being told by the company that I was working for, like, hey, we're in the middle of a pandemic. We know we said we would transition you to another role, but hey, we don't think that's going to be possible. And so really that sort of put the time on the clock for me to figure out, okay, if I am going to be potentially let go in the next couple months, what do I want to do? Where do I want to go? Do I want to keep doing what I'm doing? Do I want to go a different route? And so really it was through like listening to my friends sort of like push me and nudge me saying, hey, you can grow, you can do bigger things. And then also the company telling me, hey, we might be put in an unfortunate situation where we can't carry you on. And so really that's what sort of pushed me in the direction to figure out what I wanted to do next.
Gotcha. And how long were you in that role for?
I was in the role at that point in time for 3 years on the dot, pretty much. So I had been with the company focusing on an e-commerce business that was essentially moving from the US to the China team. And I was asked to maintain the relationship between the US office and the China office. And I did that for a little over a year. And unfortunately, that's when they were like, we know we have to bring you back into the US business, but we don't have a path right now for you.
Got it. Okay. And then, so in terms of where you were before us meeting each other professionally, kind of, and I know that you just touched on a bit of it, but in terms of mental headspace and kind of thoughts on both short-term and long-term career, where would you say you were?
Lost. No man's land. I knew I wanted to be continuing my career in the fashion industry, but I didn't know whether that was going to be from an e-commerce perspective, a strategy perspective, a planning perspective, and I really didn't know where to begin in figuring out, like, how do I do that soul searching to figure out what I want, let alone where I want to be both location-wise, physically, but also company-wise as well.
Had you had an idea of kind of where you wanted to be, though?
Kind of. So I did know I wanted to be like on the East Coast, whether that be New York City or Boston. But in the back of my head, it was always sort of the idea of like, I'm that Midwestern girl who started her career in the Midwest. Like, can I really go to the East Coast, especially New York of all places, and be as successful as I was in the Midwest?
Got it. Cool. So then in terms of us working together, so why did you decide to work with me instead of doing this on your own? Because I love to say that no one needs a coach. It's kind of like if you think of Olympians, that they have coaches, but why do they have coaches? Because they're the ones playing the sport. Yeah. And so in terms of a mentor or family or friends, like when people are afraid to reach out and ask for help or work with someone else, I'd be really curious to ask you, like, why did you decide that you wanted help?
In all of my performance reviews in the company that I was in, it was always, you take on too much just as yourself, and you need to learn to ask for help and know that that you can trust other people and you can lean on other people to get the job done. So sort of like taking that in mind, it was kind of like, this feels way bigger than me. And so that was sort of the stepping stone for identifying the fact that I did need a partner or a mentor or just like someone to talk through. Because at the end of the day, no one that I was friends with, no one in my family was in the fashion space. So I really didn't have anyone close knit that I could sort of personally lean on. And my brother, who coincidentally left his job right before the pandemic started, was able to connect with you. And every time I spoke to him, he just felt lighter, and he felt motivated and passionate and driven to go out. And even though we were at the beginning stages of a pandemic that we thought were going to last 2 months, he was so excited. And to just see him, that perspective shift and that mindset shift was honestly really what did it for me to work with you.
Got it. So it's kind of like seeing the effect it had on someone else. Okay.
Yeah, cool. For sure.
Got it. Okay. And then in terms of the experience of us actually working together. Yeah. So kind of what were your thoughts or and this is just for any type of, I mean, even where you're going now and we'll get to that, but it's like, we always have expectations going into something. It's kind of like, is it going to align with what I think, or is it going to be different? Mm-hmm. So I'd love to ask kind of what were your thoughts when we first started working together, and kind of what were your thoughts or expectations? And then what were your thoughts kind of afterwards? Like, did it align? Was it super different from what you thought originally?
Yeah. So I would say going in, again, because my brother had gone through the process, he always told me like, oh, I'm working on homework for Redstone coaching and with Jamie. And I was like, okay, like homework, don't really know what that was. But then having obviously gone through it, I was very surprised at really not necessarily how deep, but how direct the homework assignments in the program that I went through were, in terms of like really honing in on the topic at hand for the week. So that was something I definitely didn't anticipate. Also, just how broad everything was. But even though we covered so many broad topics across so many different areas, it was still very detailed and very educational, I guess, in like the sense of like you always like hear like it's easy to know a little about a lot instead of vice versa. I really hope I said that saying correctly, because I always get that one wrong. But I definitely felt like I was coming out so much more knowledgeable on all the different aspects, which was something I never had really considered. And then really finishing the program and taking a step back, I was like, not necessarily like who was that girl, but I could just tell in myself that there was a shift, and I did not think that there was ever going to be a shift in how I thought about a routine or my mindset or how I just like prepare for things. Like I never thought I was actually going to change. And I definitely did, but for the better, like 100% for the better.
I love to hear that though. Cause that's really what when I work with people, like I love to hear that kind of how you think about it. Cause I think there's a lot of, it's easy to tell someone what to do. It's a whole nother game when someone learns something themselves and then they can do it themselves. So it's like, you're not fully dependent on that external source for the rest of your life.
Yes. 100%.
And I'll ask that later, but I mean, that's kind of I love to hear that. That's like, you feel confident that you could do this later on. And it's like, because you actually learned how to do it. Correct. As opposed to being told exactly what to do. Correct.
Me and my brother always joked that we were like drinking the Jamie Kool-Aid, and it was like the best Kool-Aid that you could be drinking to just like better yourself. Because well, in the sense of like, when I would see him, like he would have his like AM PM routine, I would have mine. Like we would be talking about like what we had in like our mindset conditioning packets. And it was like through that like we jokingly realized that we want to own a lake house together at some point in time in the future. And like, go in 50%, because like we both had that on like our mindset conditioning for where we wanted to be in the long term. So then we were like, well, I mean, we might as well do it together. So total different tangent, neither here nor there, but
cool. I love it. So then in terms of the successful outcome, so we already talked about where you were. It was during the, beginning of the pandemic, you were worried about the stress of, am I going to have a job? Am I not going to have a job? And also, by the way, I think you're very humble and you always are. You crushed. You were incredible at what you did. You were very good at what you did.
Thank you.
And so as a high achiever, you were like, even you were worried about what's going to happen.
Yes.
Now kind of that's where you started. Where are you now? So talk about what were all the hurdles? Because you also had hurdles to get through.
I was going to start there.
Talk about the hurdles and then also talk about your perseverance and what you ultimately achieved.
Yeah. So really the biggest hurdles for me was that I was interested in moving to the city that was the mecca for the pandemic, in an industry that had laid off upwards of 40% of its workforce. And I was trying to get my foot in the door. And I had incredible success with networking, but unfortunately it was because of the fact that so many people were on furlough or they were laid off, and they had the time to have those conversations with me and provide advice and really provide insight. So the first hurdle was just trying to connect with people who were in unfortunate circumstances. And then from there, it was trying to apply for jobs in an industry that was so heavily saturated with amazing, phenomenally overqualified people. I know there were multiple times where I was applying to jobs and I was being told that someone with over 7 years of experience was getting a position where they were in the job posting only asking for 2 to 4. So it was incredibly discouraging to just like take a step back and go, I know I have the experience. I know I'm qualified for these positions, and I'm just losing out to more experienced individuals in terms of years, because it's a huge benefit for the company at that point to bring somebody of that level into a lower level position. So I would say those 2 hurdles were pretty big. And then the other hurdle I would say was, thankfully, I wasn't laid off by the company that I was working for. And I was transitioned into an amazing team in a role that I wholeheartedly wanted to be in and just grow and learn as much as possible in. So I ultimately put my job hunt on hold because I wanted to learn and grow so much in that position. And I know that was like a success, but it was also a hurdle in the sense of like, I pressed pause, and pressing play after you have just mentally checked out sort of from your dream and the networking and just the continuous reaching out, it is so hard. Like it is so incredibly difficult to press pause. And I had many conversations with my friends and my brother, and I honestly feel like you at that point as well, of just like, I need to get back on this horse, but like, how do I get back? And that's when I referred back to what we had worked through that summer in terms of like, okay, I got to get back into a routine. I need to get back into getting my mindset right. And just, it sounds so silly to say, but it came down to, what can I do? I need to do one thing a day that's going to help me get to New York, whether that's messaging a couple people on LinkedIn, whether that's looking at just job postings, or whether it's reading an article, whatever have you. I needed to do one thing a day to help me get to New York, and starting small and then building back up really helped me get back on the horse. So that being said, those couple little hurdles, the successes, once I did get back on that horse, I was getting interviews at all of my target companies because I had previously applied to those companies. I had previously networked, and several recruiters and people had at least heard of me in some way, shape, or form. And so every time I was applying, I was reaching out to all of those individuals, just saying, hey, already applied, any advice, any insight regarding the role, and really just trying to really reconnect with them. And ultimately, that's how I got my current position.
Awesome.
Well, current upcoming position.
And are you willing to share any names of kind of what those targets were and then where you're going now?
Yeah. So target companies included 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏, Coach, Stuart Weitzman, Rent the Runway, and Tory Burch. And I was lucky enough to interview with most of them. So.
And I think that's important because people, especially if you're coming from the Midwest or an area that's not, a major, massive fashion hub, it's sometimes even just thinking about getting those interviews just seems impossible. It's like, how can that even possibly happen? They won't even look at me. Like, you are living, breathing proof that not only did you get those interviews, you now have a job with one of them in New York City. And I hope that you deeply inspire a lot of people with that story, because that is
it's a hustle, and it is going to it's going to be I can't remember how you would say it, but it was essentially like the most they're going to say is no. And at that point, you haven't wasted any time. You've lost nothing. So it's like, why not just reach out? And I mean, with Tory Burch, I applied to a position at Tory Burch in the summer when me and you were originally working together. And it was one of the many instances where we ended up moving forward with interviews on people who had multiple times more years of experience than what I had. And while I hadn't communicated with that specific recruiter since that point in time, when she told me I wasn't going to have enough experience to be considered for an interview, when I saw the current posting for the associate planner role, I just responded to that thread and was like, hey, no, we haven't chatted in a long time. I accepted an associate planning position with the current company that I was at. I was very focused on growing within that role over the last couple months, but now I'm ready to hop back in, attached as my resume. Please let me know if you or somebody else would be a better point of contact regarding this position. And from that moment that I sent that email to a week and a half later, I was given the position at Tory Burch. So it's so incredible when you're able to, because at the end of the day, some of my friends would have been like, ooh, do you really want to like reach out to somebody who told you no for a position almost a year ago and you haven't talked to them since? But at that point I was like, this is my top target company. This is exactly the role that I want to be in. What do I have to lose?
Yeah.
And that email is why I'm headed to New York. So
I love to hear. Oh man. All right. So then in terms of longer term, so we've worked together, kind of, you're going off now. And when you think of just our time together and what we talked about, the things that we work through, how do you see that kind of influencing, or has that changed your mindset, your self-confidence, or just kind of your overall perspective on both life and or career?
Oh, it's us working together has changed all of those aspects, honestly. I won't say never. I didn't believe that I was going to be able to break into New York City. And through working with you, you were able to be that outside party that helped illustrate to me all of the insanely amazing things I did at the employer that I was at for almost 4 years. And you were able to help me not only see that experience, but translate that experience and see how it was transferable in so many different capacities. And then beyond that, when it comes to the mindset conditioning and just the routines and just being your best self, I wouldn't be so calm about moving to the city if it wasn't for us working together. Because knowing me, I would be older Dorothy would have been like stressing out, oh my God, can I do this? Am I capable of this? And reflecting back on, this is what I've wanted. I've worked for this. I've proven it in so many different capacities in my previous positions. I'm ready. Like this, there's no better time than the present to get started and get moving. And I don't think I would have realized it as quickly as I did if it wasn't for us working together.
So what would you share with, and this is, I'd love to end on this, but in terms of, there's going to be a lot of other people out there that hopefully watch this or hopefully hear your story, and they're going to see themselves in where you started, where it's, I'm in a position.
Yeah.
I don't think I want to stay here for the rest of my life, definitely, and probably not for the long term or even medium term.
Yeah.
Maybe not the short term. So they might be thinking about potentially making a change, either in their personal life or in their career. What would be, based on your experience, like everything that you just went through, what would be one of the most important pieces of advice that you would share with someone who is in your situation?
I would say ask for help and seek out help, because I am so thankful that I didn't try to do this on my own, because I know if I would have done it on my own, it would have taken me maybe a couple more years to get to where I'm going if it wasn't for the help that I received. And beyond the help, I mean, we're both pretty much the same age. So I feel like I was able not only to gain like a mentor and just guidance from this process, but I truly do feel like I also gained a friend within the process as well. And for that, I mean, that's always like a huge plus when you can go through life and I mean, honestly, like be like, I hate that I'm going to say this, but like be vulnerable in like admitting to somebody, I don't know what to do. And I'm coming to you to seek help and seek guidance. And so I truly do think like knowing you can't probably do it all as fast as you want to do it without having some sort of guidance, I think is huge. The other thing I will say too, there's also a lot of self-work that you sort of, for me personally, I would say I definitely struggled with imposter syndrome. And I still kind of do to a degree, but I'm able to recognize that now and nip that in the bud and push on and push forward. And I don't think I would have been able to achieve that again as quickly as I did if it wasn't for me and you working together and your guidance and your check-ins. And because there's like a level of accountability. Like when I knew that I was going to have a good long chat with Jamie on a Thursday, I knew I wanted to be able to say, I did X, Y, and Z for the homework or X, Y, and Z for the personal development. And truly the accountability aspect was also something that is incredibly invaluable. So,
and I think that too, like how that's translated into just your network and the relationships that you've built within fashion.
Yes.
It's just awesome. Cause I think that it's, I mean, this was, step one, but it's the relationships that you're building with people who are double your age, who've been in the industry for 20 or 30 years. It's like, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story, Dorothy. It was a pleasure working with you. And I hope that other people who are in your situation see this.
I hope so too. And I truly cannot wait to just see other videos like this and other snippets like this of people that you have worked with or other people out there who are just trying to achieve not only their personal best, but also their professional best. So looking forward.
Awesome. Thank you.